All right, folks, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to be working through OTN 7, which analyzes Part 3, Chapters 1 through 3. We've already completed our SQ3R, so today we're going to be diving in to some more specific pieces of text and thinking about how Orwell is developing his themes in this selection of text. Okay, before we do that, let's quickly look at the top of the week announcements. All right, first and foremost, make sure that you are keeping up with your discussion grade procedure on a daily basis. Second, you should have already sent me your email confirmation confirming that you have read Part 3, Chapters 1 through 3 by 3 p.m. of yesterday. If you have not done so, your email is late, but I will still accept it. All right. Throughout the course of this week, you need to be reading Part 3 of 1984. I will need reading check confirmation of that by next Monday. Aside from that, continue to work on completing your OTNs as we complete them in class, and ensure that you are thinking about your Quarter 4 essay, which will be due anytime from May 18th to May 22nd. That is your canon evaluation essay. Okay? So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our analysis of OTN 7, which looks at chapters 1 through 3 of Part 3, all right? So, in this section of text, Orwell is going to continue to illustrate and develop the significance of Winston's rebellion against the totalitarian control of the party. Now, obviously, Winston's rebellion it has been stopped outwardly. He's not allowed to go to Mr. Charrington's room or carry on his affair with Julia or continue journaling in the journal or buy things like the glass paperweight and to value them. But, right, that doesn't mean the meaning of the rebellion is over, right? Rather, as we analyze Part 3, we're going to understand why the party allowed Winston to rebel against them in the first place, what goal that they were attempting to accomplish in allowing him to do so. All right, and as we understand the answer to that very fundamental question, why they allowed him to do so, we will understand more fully the significance of the rebellion and also, by extension, the significance of the entity that controls this environment. All right, and just what exactly makes this environment so deeply dystopian. All right, so deeply the worst possible environment a person could live in. Right. I do hope you understand that it wouldn't be dystopian fiction if Winston succeeded in his rebellion, right? Does that make sense? It's not dystopia. That's not the worst possible world. In fact, that's a good world in which a tyrannical force is overthrown. That's not dystopia. That's comedy. That is precisely what the kind of story that provides hope for us. This story is not meant to inspire hope, but rather to act as a warning about the devastating effects of allowing the wrong people, all right, the party, to obtain control of society and of the lives of the individuals in that society. Okay? So, what we are going to do is analyze how some of these passages, looking specifically at this passage, this passage, this passage, and this passage, begin to develop a kind of collective impression about what the party is doing. Okay? So, in this section of text, all right, when we turn to Part 3, all right, it becomes clear when we read Part 3 that part of what the party is trying to do to Winston, the reason why they bring him to the Ministry of Love, and they don't just shoot him in the head, right? Why do they not just shoot him in the head and vaporize him after he has rebelled? Has he not disobeyed their totalitarian authority? Do they not then therefore have the responsibility in order to maintain the cogency of their totalitarian control, their omnipotence? Do they not then therefore have the responsibility to destroy him and vaporize him immediately, to wipe him off the face of the earth and all record of his existence so that any threat to their control could not possibly have existed? Well, no. All right, because their work with Winston is not quite done. What they want to do is recreate Winston in their own image. All right, so think about the biblical language of the image of man, okay? So what I mean by that is what the party wants to do with Winston before they kill him, all right, is they want to make his brain perfect. They do not want, therefore, to create a martyr. All right, so they're going to recreate Winston in their own image in the Ministry of Love, all right, as a kind of just recompense for his rebellion. After allowing him in parts 1 and 2, listen carefully, to discover his own essence as a human being, the fact that he is a rational creature, the fact that he is a creature, a physical creature, with bodily instinctual longings that, when rightly ordered, okay, according to the way that they were formed and designed to be experienced, lead to a kind of reasonable and blessed life. That he is a soulful or spiritual creature with the capacity of self-reflection, with the capacity to transcend himself and to consider his own value and also the value of all men around him. That he is a free individual, capable of choice. All of these reflections on the ontic essence of humanity that Winston is allowed to discover in parts 1 and 2. Please pay close attention to all the words that I just said. His discovery of his essence, his most basic nature, right, have to be conquered, have to be remade, have to be justified to the party's understanding of the essence of humanity. They are going to, in this way, like God, or like an anti-God, right, unmake man and remake him into their own image, okay? But in order to do this, right, they're not just going to lock Winston in a cage and treat him like a dog. You want to know why? Because that would make Winston hate the party. That would not make him love them. That would turn him into even more of a martyr. That would turn him into even more of a rebel. Okay? They cannot simply strip him of his humanity and leave him stripped as such. They must warp his most basic human longings. They must turn them against themselves. They must give him parts of what he was made to be, carefully engineered so that his partial experience of his own humanity will lead to him being enlisted in the process of his own oppression. Okay, so this is a kind of theme, all right, a common theme that we have seen developed in all of the literature we have been reading up to this point in the class, all right, starting all the way back with Macbeth, okay? So remember Macbeth, the tragic hero who kills the King of Scotland and his pursuit of power leads to his own undoing. Well, why did he do that? Okay, what drove Macbeth to engage or enlist himself in the process of his own destruction? Well, largely Lady Macbeth, right? Lady Macbeth manipulates, and this is not the only reason why Macbeth does what he does, but it's one reason, right? One thing that leads Macbeth to do what he does is Lady Macbeth's manipulation of Macbeth's most basic will, all right, to be viewed as a man, to be viewed as masculine. Again, one of these fundamental, essentially human elements of the human soul, this understanding of masculinity or femininity, what it means to be a good man or a good woman, right? Macbeth wants to pursue that definition. His wife calls his masculinity into question, and he, in defense of his own ego, goes and enlists himself in his own oppression, right? Undoing and destroying his life. What about Shylock? Well, this is clearly evident in Act 4, the climactic scene of Merchant of Venice, in which Portia not only strips Shylock of all of his material wealth, listen carefully to this, right? But also does what? Strips him of two basic elements of his spirit or his soul as a human being. She forces him to convert to Christianity, which to a Christian audience can easily be misunderstood, right? This is not an actual conversion or an act of grace, right? I can't take a baseball bat and say, Sadie Wilkie, convert from paganism to Christianity or I'll bash your brains out, right? That's clearly not belief. That's clearly not a willed response to a call to a life of faith and obedience to one's understanding of the revelation of God. All right, that is not belief, right? Portia, in that sense, strips Shylock of what? His most basic human freedom to believe, and also to bless, right? Who is Shylock forced to bless? Lorenzo, the man who stole his daughter, a man who deserved his curse, right? Portia forces Shylock to curse, stripping him of his most basic right to bless that which he deems good. All right. In other words, right, Shylock, Shylock is enlisted in his own oppression by Portia in that final scene, as he is forced to do these things, and they seem to be, or they are structured as acts of the will. Here, Shylock, this is what you have to do. Go ahead. And it is in your best interest. Okay. This is also evident in Iago's relationship with Othello, right? Think about Iago's relationship with Othello. How does Iago destroy Othello? Well, by appealing to Othello's most basic human desires for the experience of love and respect. Animals don't have those kinds of basic desires. Yes, they desire comfort. They desire the attention of their masters, but that is ultimately a reflection of their desire to survive and to experience comfort while they are surviving. Othello is not merely looking for comfort, creature comfort. He's looking for the respect and the esteem of the Venetian society. He's looking for he is looking in a very basic sense to be viewed as a good man. Again, good is a concept only fully understood by human beings. All right. This is also evident in Gulliver's oppression in Lilliput, as the Lilliputians use Gulliver's most basic humanity, right, his most basic human longings, okay, his most basic human capacities to believe, all right, and to reason morally, and to understand and apprehend that which is good. They use those things, they strip him of those rights, and they enlist him in the process of his own oppression, and he thinks that when he's signing the Articles of Liberation that he is what? Free. Exactly at the moment in which he has signed away his most basic human freedom, which is to reason morally. Okay, this is also evident in the creature's rejection by Victor. What does Victor, the oppressor of the creature, not give to his son that the son deserves? Love and esteem, love and respect. He strips him of his most basic needs. All right, he strips him of his most basic freedoms. All right, cursing the creature to a kind of existence in which he is continually rejected. All right, obviously the creature's longings are not merely animalian. All right, he's not merely looking for survival and comfort. All right, but rather he is looking to live a kind of good life, a blessed life that is denied to him by his creator, and it leads to all manner of suffering. In other words, this pattern of oppressive individuals, the Lilliputians, Victor, Iago, Lady Macbeth, all of these oppressors, all of these individuals who use the other characters like Macbeth or Othello or Gulliver, they use these characters' humanity against them to enlist them in their own destruction. All right. In other words, the human soul is destroyed, all right, using the very components that constitute it. All right. And in that, and the party is going to attempt to do that very same thing. All right. This is clarified for us in the beginning portion of Part 3, in which, all right, the ministry of love on page 229, quickly turn to page 229, is described, all right, in this piece of text that you ought to mark as the place with no darkness, where O'Brien and Winston, as has been foretold in the Journal of Winston, as has been foreknown in the sort of subconscious mind of Winston, where his fears of being caught live and are repressed throughout his rebellion, but emerged in his dreams. Okay, this place where there is no darkness is ultimately not the heaven, not the place of enlightenment that Winston was longing after, but rather the ministry of love. Okay, So first, I want you to think about what heaven is, what heaven means, right? To long after heaven, to long after a place where a place that we would describe as blessed, all right, or the kingdom of God in the Christian tradition. It is ultimately a purely human longing that is related to the human being's longing to understand and be exposed to a kind of inner truth, right? Who lives in heaven? God. He is the inner truth, the ultimate truth at the back of all existence, right? When we imagine heaven, we imagine dwelling with God, all right? We imagine achieving some kind of knowledge and relationship with that inner truth, okay? And the process, right, the place with no darkness, in other words, it's a place of enlightenment. Right? What Winston looks to and longs for in his longing for heaven is a place where he will discover his essence and live a life in alignment with his essence. That's what we that's what we use to describe what heaven is. It's a place where you are redeemed of your sin, in the Christian tradition, a threat to your essence, a threat to you living the life you were made or designed to live, and then freely pursuing that essence, right? Living out that essence for eternity, in a timeless space. Okay? So, in other words, Winston's longing for this place where there is no darkness, what he expected this place to be was a kind of heaven, all right? Well, he's not actually thinking about Christian heaven, but he's thinking about what heaven represents for human beings as a whole. This place of blessedness, this place where a person is enlightened, where they learn what their essence is and live in light of that essence. Okay? Now, no animal longs for heaven or is even capable of considering heaven, because an animal is incapable of meditating on its essence. An animal, my dog, Jazz, doesn't sit around all day thinking about the nature of what it means to be dog. Right? She simply sits around thinking about where her next meal is going to come from and when her masters are going to come home from work. Okay? That kind of existence, simple and charming as it is not the one that you have. Rather, as a human being, you are capable of meditating on your own essence and capable of imagining a world, a place where you are perfectly, a place where there is no darkness, a place where that essence is discovered, understood, known fully, a place where you live in communion with the ultimate, with God. And you enjoy the blessedness of living in that communion, right? Now, you might say, well, Mr. Dale, I don't sit around thinking about my essence either. I'm not very philosophically minded. I'm more like a dog. I'm pretty much just thinking about where my next meal is going to come from. Well, that may be so, all right, but the fact is you are capable of meditating on your own essence. You have been endowed with the capability to consider that which is good, that which is bad, and how the world ought to be. And the fact that you can suggests that you must, because you are human. And the suppression of that desire, the suppression of that task is ultimately wickedness, right? A life lived purely after creature comforts in which you do not imagine, right, what your essence is and pursue that essence and imagine a world in which that essence is fully realized, glorified, right? Then you have failed in your basic task as a human being, right? You have ignored that which you were created to do. And in the Christian tradition, there is definitely a consequence for ignoring that, right? So Winston here is taken to the place where there is no darkness, which is, all right, not the heaven he was expecting, right, but a kind of twisted heaven, where he will achieve some kind of enlightenment, where he will be, where there will be truths, inner truths revealed to him by O'Brien, where he will be, quote unquote, redeemed. But that redemption process will be the process of redeeming him away from the essence that was truly his, that he discovered in the first portion of the book, and the discovery and realignment with the essence that is given to him by the party. Okay? So this place is like, it's not hell. It's not a place of chaos where there is no learning. It's not a place where there is no sort of prescribed truths or teachings or reasoning, where there is no pursuit of meaning, but the meaning that is arrived at is utterly dehumanizing. In this way, the party uses Winston's longing for the discovery of his essence and even allows him to engage in the process of trying to discover that essence. Hence the fact that he, with O'Brien, has long philosophical conversations about what it means to be a person. Okay? If the party just wanted to treat Winston like an animal, then O'Brien wouldn't be having philosophical conversations with him about belief systems and knowledge of truth. O'Brien would simply just lock Winston in a cage and feed him dog kibbles, right? That would be utterly and horrifyingly dehumanizing, but it would not recreate Winston's spirit, because Winston's spirit would ultimately know that he was made for more than being treated like a dog. Every man knows that. It is self-evident. So the party, understanding that knowledge and also denying that truth simultaneously using doublethink, invites Winston into a kind of realm where there is no darkness, this kind of pseudo-twisted heaven, where he is offered some enlightenment, but that enlightenment ultimately serves to plunge him into the deepest, most dehumanizing darkness possible. Okay? Very interesting. Okay. Later on page 239 and 240, okay, listen carefully here. On page 239 and 240, all right, Winston begins to describe the environment in which he lives as a kind of timeless space where, and this gives more significance to the statement that is a place with no darkness, right? What incurs darkness in the natural world? Well, the setting of the sun. And the setting and rising of the sun is the way that we measure time as human beings, okay? We measure seconds and hours and days and months and years using the sun, okay, and the rotation of the sun around the earth. Okay, so the fact that this place has no darkness also signals that it's a place where there is seemingly no time. All right, Winston explains that experience, or Winston's experience of that timelessness is narrated on page 240 and 241. All right, and in this sense, right, Winston is immersed in an environment, this sort of twisted heaven, all right, where where it's the setting is described with the connotations of an eternal space. Okay. Now think about what eternity is. Okay. When we talk about eternity, right, I'm not going to write it out loud. I'm in the process of thinking. Right. When we think about eternity, okay, what we're considering are things that are true outside of time, transcendent realities. Again, a transcendent reality about, for example, what a human being is on its most basic level. What does it mean to be a human being? Of course, time and history and environment alter the way that a human being behaves, okay, and the thoughts that a human being has. But the fact that a human being can think the way a human being can think and behave the way a human being can behave signals that there is something beyond historicity, all right, or timeliness, or temporality for the human creature, that there's something essential about a human being, okay? This place, this timeless place, this place where there is no darkness, seems to be a place where timeless or eternal truths abide. Okay? Again, the party gives Winston this kind of place. Well, doesn't the party fail in dehumanizing Winston by giving him this place? Isn't this part of what it means to be a human, to consider these transcendent and eternal truths, to long after heaven? Well, yes and no, all right? Even as they give him these things that are the essential, most basic elements of humanity, what it means to be a person, all right? They structure his experience of those things in such a way that leaves him more basically inhuman than he was in the beginning. Leave him unconscious. Leave him unhuman. Leave him loving Big Brother. All right? Leave him loving tyranny, hating freedom, hating love, loving hate. Interesting. Okay? So, all of this is solidified further when we get the description of who O'Brien is and the role that O'Brien plays in Winston's re-education. Okay? So, let me read you this paragraph, and this is our last thing for the day. Okay? He was starting up from the plank bed in the half certainty that he had heard O'Brien's voice. All through his interrogation, although he had never seen him, he had the feeling that O'Brien was at his elbow, just out of sight. It was O'Brien who was directing everything. It was he who set the guards onto Winston and who prevented them from killing him. It was he who decided when Winston should scream with pain and when he should have a respite, when he should be fed, and when he should sleep, when the drugs should be pumped into his arm. It was he who asked the questions and suggested the answers. He was the tormentor. He was the protector. He was the inquisitor. He was the friend. And once Winston could not remember whether it was in drugged sleep or in normal sleep, or even in a moment of wakefulness, a voice murmured in his ear. This is O'Brien talking to Winston. "Don't worry, Winston. You are in my keeping. For 7 years I have watched over you." Notice how the language resembles kind of the biblical promise of God watching over us, counting the hairs on our heads, being faithful to us, and seeking us out and redeeming us. Now the turning point has come. I shall save you. I shall make you perfect. He was not sure whether it was O'Brien's voice. It was, but it was the same voice that had said to him, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness," in that other dream 7 years ago. O'Brien is later described on the next page as a doctor, a teacher, a priest. Okay, all the doctor, the teacher, the priest, all in different ways and in different scenarios help bring healing, help align an individual with their essence. Okay, if they're bodily sick, you take them to a doctor. Okay, if they're mentally ill, you take them to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. If they are ignorant, right, and need to learn things and meditate on ideas that they've never meditated on before, or be exposed to physical properties that they never learned about before, you take them to a teacher. Okay, if they need to understand things about God and how God works, okay, and what God's law is, you take them to a priest. All of these individuals are associated with, and O'Brien is described as all of them, okay? And O'Brien says ultimately, right, very much like each, the doctor, the teacher, and the priest promises to do, that he's going to make Winston whole. He's going to make him perfect. Well, what does it mean to be perfect? What does it mean to be redeemed? Okay, that's something that all human beings are longing after. Okay, whether consciously realized or unconsciously expressed, the human person desires to live in line, aligned with their own value system, and in that sense, to be quote unquote perfect. Even if an individual says, "I don't," my understanding of perfection, my understanding of the essence of humanity is that we're all imperfect and we should embrace each other's imperfection. Well, even that is an assertion of the way things ought to be, that which is good, and in its own sense a kind of vision of what a perfect life would look like, one where we don't judge each other, one where we accept each other's imperfections. Okay, so O'Brien here is articulating the fact that his job, his goal, is to make Winston perfect, to remake him. Okay, again, another kind of quintessential human longing, to be redeemed. Okay, to achieve enlightenment, to live in alignment with one's essence. The party and O'Brien give Winston that, but they give it to him in such a way that recreates his essence. They are going to align him not with the essence that is truly his as a human being that he discovered in parts 1 and 2, but rather with their reconstructed essence of the truly good party member, and in this way use the elements of Winston's humanity against Winston's humanity to turn Winston into a warped person. Okay, to turn Winston into a shadow, a version of the person that he was made to be. Okay, and in that way, in the party's twisted logic, to heal him, to educate him, to enlighten his soul. Right? Okay, so that is all that I have to say about the beginning portions of Part 3. I understand this stuff is pretty heady. It's pretty nuanced. It's pretty philosophically complex. But ultimately, the basic idea is that the party is like all of the other oppressors that we have read throughout the course of this year, using Winston's humanity against Winston's humanity in order to recreate him in their own image. The place that they start is his longing to live a life in accordance, in alignment with his own essence, and in that sense to live a kind of heavenly, blessed existence that corresponds to transcendent, timeless, eternal truths. The party gives him a warped version of that longing, knowing that the longing is itself irrepressible. But instead of repressing it, using it, turning it against itself to destroy the human being with the very components that make humanity. Have a great day.